My boss is a parasitic monster, and he's literally sucking the life out of us. Hyposotta fugitivus is a parasitic wasp that lays eggs inside the red-humped caterpillar. The egg hatches, and the wasp's larva begins to feast upon the caterpillar, hollowing it out from the inside. I think that's what's happening to my co-workers. For the past few days, my boss has been calling people inside his office. He closes the blinds, shuts the door, and 5 minutes later, they come out. And when they come out, something's wrong with them. They look empty, dry, as if they've been put into an oven and dehydrated somehow. Skin wrinkled, voices cracked, empty, like the shell of a peanut. But see, nobody else can see it. It's just me. To everyone else, they seem perfectly fine, and the boss is just giving them a big old congratulations. But I know what's going on. I can see. See, I work as a journalist. I write news articles, stories about things. I'm not covering anything big, really, but the job is something I like doing. I started about a year ago, and for the first few months, everything was fine. That was when we had our old boss, some old guy called Xavier Valerio. He was an okay guy, but he liked screaming at us whenever we were slacking off. Anyway, I think the company fired him because of that, because a week later, the current guy stepped in. He was a lot friendlier too. On his first day in, he brought us cookies as a welcoming gift, which is something nobody I've worked for has ever done. But the weird thing was that he would never tell us his name. Whenever I or someone asked, he'd just tell us not to worry about it. Apart from that, he seemed like a normal guy. He'd pop in from time to time, make sure we were all good, and then go back to his big office, shut the door and close the curtains. Hidden away from sight. Up until the last few days, that is. "Jennifer Smith, please come to my office." A few moments later, I'd seen Jennifer rise from her desk, walking to the office room, heeding the command on the loudspeaker. The boss was there, in front of his office, a flashy smile on his face, distant, yet reassuring. At the time, I didn't think anything of it, so I just got back to work. I ignored all the signs, the door closing, the blinds folding, a lock clicking. I should have noticed the lock earlier. He'd never locked it before. Anyway, a few minutes later, Jennifer came out, and there was something wrong with her. She didn't look sad nor happy, but simply dead. She looked like all the life had been sucked out of her. Did you know that a human eye naturally vibrates at a certain speed, and when you look at someone else's eyes, the brain naturally cancels out their eye's vibrations? That's what gives the quality of life to a person. Dead people's eyes don't vibrate. That's why they look dead. And that's exactly what happened to Jennifer. Her eyes had stopped moving, and I could only see the empty eyes of the dead. "Timothy Roman, come to my office," the voice on the loudspeaker announced. I could swear there was a tinge of something else in the voice, something not human. I watched as Timothy rose from his seat and moved towards the office. He met Jennifer halfway, greeted her, and went on. No talk about the clearly dead look in her eyes. Same as before, the boss just smiled, shut the door, and locked it. And like before, it was only a mere 10 minutes before Timothy walked out, looking neither sad nor happy, but dead. I looked back at Jennifer, who was at her cubicle, busy typing in a new story to present. I wondered if I was seeing things. No matter what, she looked dead, even without seeing her eyes. Timothy looked the same too. No, it wasn't me, but them. "Jason McIntosh, please come to my office," the loudspeaker declared. Jason got up and began to walk. I don't know why, but I walked over and stopped him midway. "I don't think going in there is a good idea," I whispered. Now, I don't know Jason all that well, and he was kind of a bully, but something about the boss's smile and the dead eyes made me say it. "What are you talking about?" He rolled his eyes, annoyed. "Does anything look wrong to you?" I asked. "About Jennifer or Tim?" He took a quick glance. "They look fine. Now get out of my way, dude." Jason shoved past me nonetheless, and I stared at him, my eyes meeting the boss's for a split second. The boss's eyes were filled with life, more lively than any person I'd ever seen before, almost like he was sucking the life out of my co-workers. That's impossible, right? I saw Jason walk into the room. The door closed, the lock clicked, and that was that. Someone told me to get to work, and I feigned an excuse, saying I needed to get water from the other room. I did so, and came back promptly, but just before I headed over to my cubicle, I felt a tug of curiosity and passed by the boss's office, stopping at his door. I looked around, watching to see if anyone was looking at me. When I saw no eyes on me, I pressed my head to the door, listening. There was a faint noise inside, I thought was an air fan, but as I listened, I realised the noise wasn't that of a fan. It had more variation, like something that was alive, and as I listened closer, I could swear it was the thrum of wings. The host caterpillar of Hypasota fugitivus shrinks as the larvae within the parasite's egg hatches and subsequently eats. The caterpillar becomes hard and brittle, and further, the Hypasota larvae spins a cocoon before the caterpillar breaks open, and the wasp child emerges. I was spending too much time at the door, and I swiftly returned to my desk, just as Jason emerged from the room, dead, like the others. "Jason?" I asked. "What do you want?" Jason stated. It was almost robotic, like an AI voice. It was supposed to be a question, but it sure didn't sound like one. "What happened in there?" I asked. "What did he say?" "He was just congratulating me on my work. He said I did a good job and was giving me a gift." "What gift?" Jason simply turned away and walked back to his cubicle. I followed him and tried to get his attention, but it was like he couldn't hear me at all, and when he turned to look at the clock, it was like he stared right past me. I just went back to my desk and continued writing the article. I didn't get far. All the strangeness was getting to me. Eventually, though, I was home, and before long I was asleep, locked away in the land of dreams. But there was something strange. I'm not sure if I was dreaming for the part or not, but it sure felt impossible. I woke up and looked out the window, and there was this thing there. It had wings, and there were these appendages coming out of it. It was horrifying. I dreamt the thing was at the window, tapping, trying to get in my room. Anyway, I don't know what happened next, but the next thing I knew was that I'd heard the ringing of my alarm, and an hour later, I was back at work, typing away at my computer. "Morgana Bondsman," the loudspeaker called. 10 minutes past, Jeffrey Loom. One by one, my co-workers were going inside the office and coming out changed, and I could only watch as it happened. And then it occurred to me, when would my name be called? As I wondered, I studied my changed co-workers. They had this rhythm to them that couldn't be broken. For example, Jennifer would work for 30 minutes straight, then leave to go for a cup of water, and then come back exactly a minute later. And then she'd do it all over again, like a clock. Timothy followed a similar schedule, only 10 minutes behind Jennifer's. Jennifer would get up, and then Tim would leave to go too soon after. And then, 10 minutes later, Jason would rise, and 10 minutes later, the next who had been transformed. It was chilling to watch them in a pattern, all repeating, over and over. But what was worse was when I took a glance at their screens. Their Word or Docs file was open, yet all they had written was plain gibberish, just long lines of nonsense. And if that wasn't enough, their skin was turning a greyer shade, and I could swear wrinkles, just the faintest, were forming, and now their skin seemed rough and brittle. When it was time to go for our lunch break, I noted that the affected weren't leaving the office, instead remaining to follow their patterns of nonsense writing, water, and returning. Everyone usually left for lunch break. Nobody liked the boring bland heat of the office, but yet they stayed. I wondered if they would leave the office and head out into the cafeteria with us. I guess that's why I decided to wait out in the hall, to see what would happen to them, to prove that nothing was wrong with them, and that I was probably going mad. So I waited, and waited, waiting and watching. I was getting tired as I lounged around, getting hungrier by the second. At last, just as I was about to leave, I heard something. It was something bizarre, but familiar. Not because I'd heard it often, but because I'd heard it before. It was the fluttering of wings, the same sound I'd heard inside the boss's office, and then, as I crept through the hallway, I heard what I can only describe as an egg cracking open and something crying out. I crept, arriving at the corner. I took a peek, and then recoiled in both horror and disgust. The sight I'd seen was... No, it was impossible. I took another peek, and once again shuddered back in fear. I saw the boss there, except he was wrong. The thing inside was dry and... evil. It was some sort of massive insect with shades of its skin that resembled parts of a human, and when folded into themselves, could resemble exactly like my boss. But that wasn't what scared me the most. No, what did, however, was the forms of the changed. They were kneeling on the floor as if to bow down to the thing I'd called boss. These creatures, a smaller version of the boss, were breaking free of the flesh of my co-workers, piercing through flesh and bone, and digging out. Their black eyes emerged with the rest of their bodies. I took another peek, only to realise that each of the things breaking free of my co-workers seemed to resemble them, dotted with parts that looked like them when folded. And then, once they were free, usually 1 or 2 per body, they would squeal, and their host would fall to the ground, dead. I began to back away, horrified. Perhaps this was a bad idea, or maybe I had simply gone insane. I let out a yelp as I suddenly stumbled, tripping and landing with a thud. The fluttering in the room stopped. I saw a shadow emerge from the room, and I got to my feet and ran as fast as I could before the insects inside could see me. I stopped when I got to the cafeteria, hungry and out of breath. A minute later, the boss appeared, looking around as if looking for someone. Me. His movements were shaky and quick, and now I could see clearly the parts of him that weren't human. I could see the joints on his arms and legs that folded, making it only look like an arm. I could see the large black holes that were eyes, masked cleverly by what I assumed to be large antennae that folded to look like skin. The boss seemed confused and returned, walking back to the hallway, eerily jerking and shaking. I was safe, and that's also when I decided to start writing my story. This one, the very one you're hopefully listening to right now. Lunch was over soon, and I followed my co-workers back into the office. Only about 15 minutes had passed. And yet, there was no sign of the dead bodies of my co-workers that had been there earlier. No sign of blood, no torn clothes, no bits of flesh on the ground. Notably though, my dead co-workers were nowhere to be seen, and yet, nobody questioned a thing, too focused on their own work to even notice the missing. I saw the boss walk back to his office, an unchanging smile on his face. Come to think of it, I'd never seen him without a smile. I decided this was it. I was out. I was quitting, getting out now. I took a glance at the boss's office, watching him watch me through the window. And now, I'm trying to finish this as soon as I can, and when I'm done, I'm leaving. Some poor soul was just called into the office. I tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. Look, my name is Canopy Hydrangea. If I go missing or something happens, someone has to say something. Oh no. I just looked at the exit. My dead co-workers are there. I thought they'd just be gone, but they're there. 2 of them at least. Jennifer and Tim are there, talking, but I can tell they are watching me and blocking the exit. The guy just came out of the office. He looks dead too, and... oh God, I just heard another announcement on the loudspeaker. Canopy Hydrangea, please come into my office.